Alright. I think we are just about good to go. I'm just getting last bit of stuff set up here, and then we'll go ahead and jump over to the drawing stream layout. Bruh. Alright, let's go ahead and switch layouts here. Okay, for today's drawing stream, we're going to be going back to some concept work with the Homeworlders species. It's probably been over a month, maybe even more, since we last worked on this stuff. Let me make sure my mic is coming in. I'm going to be playing a Bgm Loop from our last jam stream. It's the one that we did a couple days ago. I haven't done any recording since then, but this will be just playing in the background, and then maybe at the halfway point of the stream today we can create a new one. I'll either do that or I'll cycle back to one of the old ones. So let me get the background music playing, get the sound equalized, and then we'll get started. Alright, I'm gonna leave the BGM there, and we'll see if it's too loud or soft. Yeah, I have the faders down pretty low, and I still want my speaking stuff to be the most prominent here, so we'll make sure that's good to go as we proceed. All right, that should be everything. So what are we doing today? I thought it'd be interesting to take a break from the Monster Hunter Fusion project, which is wrapping up for the first set we've been working on. And I wanted to go back to the Homeworlder concept development, which, again, it's been a little while since we've talked about it. And I did have some ideas that I wanted to explore and kind of experiment around with. And fortunately now that I have my template set up, we can work at a higher resolution and it should result in a better image. I had pulled up the original one that we've been working on with the male and female models for the Homeworlder anatomy. And again, this was probably a couple months ago when we finished these, but this was done at a much smaller resolution. So now I'm working off my current template. But I think what would be interesting today, since we've got the initial sketch work and primary stuff, I actually ported in here. The resolution is going to be a bit fuzzy because since these were drawn at a different resolution, but I brought them in here for reference. So what I was thinking of doing today is sketching out some new models to use. And now that we're working at a good resolution, there should be no problems with the image quality. But to start, I think I want to just do a base pose primary for the models. And we can kind of do that based off of the original ones that we were working with. There'll probably be a similar neutral pose. What I really want to start is a place to work from as far as a rough framework, and then from there I'll be able to draw in actual details. So this will be like the pose base, as it were. I'm going to start in with some rough shapes here to get the kind of figure together. And then when it comes to the actual model itself, I'll work off of that primary to start sketching in the details. So this is going to be essentially the base for the neutral pose that we use here, and I'm using the proportions and sketch from this other one that we did a long time ago, just as a start. You can turn this old sketch on and off as we need here. Roughen spots for the toes. This is just a placeholder spot for the tail. Again, I don't need to put anything really that concrete as far as specific details. It's mostly body shape and limbs and kind of positioning. Even things like the length of the arms, kind of the proportionality there, doesn't need to be exact, because that'll be kind of tweaked and adjusted for the actual models that we're going to be drawing out. So it doesn't need to be completely final, it just needs to be placeholders essentially. And likewise for things like the digits, doesn't need to be exact, just more of a placeholder and spot so I know kind of roughly where everything is lying, and then I can draw it out once we're actually sketching specific details. Even something like the obscured arm here doesn't even need to be that filled in. Proportions need to be hitting from roughly the same points so that it's not lopsided. But other than that, it doesn't need to be too exact for the primary here. That. I can also do things like make sure the orientation is not leaning to one side. In fact, I should be flipping my canvas more. I need to get in the habit of doing that frequently. Okay, I think actually doesn't have much of a noticeable lean, which is good. I do want to rotate it slightly. Placement of the tail doesn't matter too much. It's just going to be there, kind of blocked in case I need it later. I'm just putting in some guiding lines to mark off different sections here. They're not going to matter too much. In fact, I want to make sure this doesn't get too cluttered. I think for approximation, it's fine. Chances are, depending on what I want to tweak or alter when it comes to the proportions, if I want to make the model more lanky or taller or whatnot, then all I have to do is just adjust where a lot of these guidelines fall. And one thing that'll be noteworthy, depending on what we decide for the model, will be the style of legs. if they're going to be completely reverse jointed or regular, non-reverse jointed, whatever that biology term for that is. That'll be adjustable on the fly, so I'm not too worried about that for the primary here. So let's call this pry. So now we have a real rough pose base to work off of when sketching out the concept stuff that we actually want to draw. So I think for the next step, I'm going to use this as, again, it's meant to be a real sketched out base for rough proportions and everything else. And now I'm going to start doing the second primary, which is going to be actually putting in some details and things that we want for the specific model. And again, it doesn't need to be too exact. It could be pretty rough for this first pass, but the features will be more defined. And then we'll see how much more detail and definition needs to be added in before we kind of finalize it and start going on to line work. Alright, as we've discussed in previous sessions when we're looking at Homeworlder anatomy and specific details, one of the most noteworthy things for the species is this part of the head. It's like a bone or a shell-like part that grows over and around the cranial parts of the head, called the crown. And the shape of the crown and its features are pretty distinct based on individuals. So it'll be good, for the sake of experimenting here with the models, to come up with some ideas that we haven't quite seen yet for shapes and overall layout and design for the crowns. Move the head down a little bit so the neck's not quite so disproportionately long. Now, as we move down towards the torso, now we're going to need to start thinking about things like build and specific proportions when it comes to this particular model. And what I sketched out in the first primary here on the bottom is pretty kind of average build, not too lanky, not too thick, just kind of right in the middle to give me kind of a neutral point to work with. I think it would be interesting because I don't think we haven't done this for the Homeworlder sketches so far. I do want to experiment around with some other builds that are not quite as middle of the road. So what if we went for a more bulky, heavier build for this particular model? And again, I don't know if this model is going to be male or female. We'll figure it out by the end. It's not going to really have any bearing on the actual design. But I do like the idea of kind of a more heavy build. So we do kind of a more broad upper torso and chest. Which is also going to be reflected in the armor and protective plates, I think. Following the guidelines and where we sort of roughed in the proportions here, which I can adjust later as well if it looks too jarringly unusual. And I have the plates following down the front of the body towards the lower end of the torso down here. And we'll keep it sort of approximate. Since we're going for kind of a more bulky, heavy build here, we could experiment with some more patterns on the shell plating on the limbs to sort of reflect what we're kind of going for here on the torso itself. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and give myself some more room to work here. slightly longer arms, reaching a little bit closer towards the knee joints. We'll adjust those on the fly if we need to, but I'm going to rough in some patterns here and we'll see how it looks. We'll rough in roughly whereabouts the fingers and digits are going to be. I'm thinking for the arms, for at least the forearms up to the hands, something that looks more like kind of armor gauntlets, like a shell plating going up would be interesting. Maybe more of a trailing edge going upwards. Give it kind of more of a sharp look could work. Now for the legs. I think I might shorten the proportions on the legs a little, but give them a bit more of a sturdy foundation. We can do maybe something like this. Make sure and adjust the proportions accordingly on each side to make sure they're still in line and falling in the right spot. But as far as the sort of shape and everything goes, I think this will be functional. They're marginally shorter than the original base model here, but that's okay. The ultimate difference ends up not being dramatically shorter in perspective here. It's mostly just the kind of bulkiness for the thighs and adding a little bit more mass to the lower legs, calves area. I like the idea of the same style of plating, kind of like we have here on the forearms, running along the tops of the thighs here. It would be good to refer back to these other models that we created before so we're not duplicating designs. So I'm going to leave this one here. I think this was the female model. I'm going to leave this one off to the side just so I can refer back to it occasionally. Definitely want to avoid tapering too much here on the lower parts of the shins so it doesn't look like this thing has little scrawny chicken legs. I think in the end, I didn't really shorten the legs so much as I just reproportioned them. But that's fine. You can always scale parts of the sketch here if I need to, if I really want to adjust the proportions more than I have already. This leg's actually a little bit too long. here. Those are just placeholder lines. I'm trying to get everything that line up accordingly here so it doesn't look like this thing's feet are disproportionately off. Alright, let's figure out how we're going to do the toes. I might as well put them in here. This is a similar pattern we've used on the other models. The overall orientation of the toes is not something I feel like needs a ton of attention. That might work fine. We can leave it like that for now. Do something like that. I can always fix the layout of the toes if I need to later. Now for the tail. Let's see, where we're going to put the tail. It's not going to be too visually distracting. We go down here for now. Now the other arm. Just need to match up the perspective. That should be close enough. Well, let's see. Let's see if we can do with the arm plating here. I'm gonna revise this a little bit. instead of the sharp edges, I'm going to go for a bit more of kind of a rounded plating look. And add some contour lines going up this way to sort of change the texturing a little bit. Something like that. Now, I didn't really define the shoulders too well. So maybe we could do a similar type of rounded plating on the shoulders. And have the same sort of contour lines here. We're going to need to shore up the perspective on the lower leg plating, I think. I think the rough approximation is fine. I just need to be careful when I actually go in and do the line work and start inking. Alright, let's get rid of the under primary. Now we can start trying to finalize the sketch layer here as best we can. And we want to do that prior to going in to do the inking, because I don't think I need to do another primary after this. I think if we can get all the details and stuff that we want on the model here, then we should be good to go in and do line work right after this. That will work for the upper body. Now I'm just adding in details and contours on the toes. I've got an idea. We'll see if this works. I think I want to do actual talon tips on the toes, which is not something we've seen on any of the models so far. easier to find once I actually do the line work. So I'm just giving myself a guide so I can see where everything kind of falls here. Need to be a little more precise on the sketch layer here for the left foot. It's getting a little bit muddy. That should be alright. I'll just need to make sure when I do the line work, I clean that section up a little. Let's save our progress so far. Alright, what I'm going to do is zoom out a little bit and start doing some final cleanup on the sketch layer here, and then we'll move on to line work and inking. I think the toes are still too short on the left foot. try and scrap the whole thing and figure it out from scratch here. Alright, that's a little bit closer. Alright, I think that'll be fine for now. I'm gonna have to clean that up a little bit more once I get in and start doing the inking, but I think that'll be fine for now. Now let's go and see if there's anything else I want to add to the other features besides the body, specifically the head. I like the idea of slightly larger horns on the crown to sort of give it some distinct features. Alright. Hide the other one for now. I'm going to have to refer back to some of those other models when it comes to color paletting and how I want to do the color template for this one. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to inking now. If I see anything else I want to change along the way, then I could do that as part of the inking. Let's see, line weight wise. think this will be a good line weight. Be consistent with the other things we've done so far. I'm gonna drop it down to two more ticks. That way I can vary my pressure a little bit. Yeah, I think that'll do. Right away I can see the same thing I saw when we were working on the monster fusions before. Working at a higher resolution is definitely making a difference. Guiding lines on the outside first, and then fill in the ridges so I'm not off center. And like we've done on previous drawings in the past, once I get the line work roughed in and drawn, I'll go in and do a cleanup sweep afterwards before we move on to color assignment. Alright, moving further down, getting close to the upper body, upper torso. sure I'm matching up everything here so it's not off center. Start putting in the additional contour lines and guiding sections here. Same goes up here for the chest. Start defining in the rest of the upper body, moving into the midsection. All right. Still keep an eye on the proportions and how everything is coming together here, but I think we will not need to alter a whole lot. Continue to work our way down to the forearms, the hands. Let's see. Let me take a quick break to look at the BGM here. This one, I might go back a bit earlier in the list here. I got my reverb on.
I'll drop.
All right, this is an older one. gotta slightly tweak my sound settings a bit here just to make sure you can still hear me. All right, that should be fine. Let's switch up the track for the next section of the stream here. There we go. Now we add the fingers. Now we can start adding in the lower body, lower legs, or legs in general. And keep working our way through. Alright, I need to make sure I get the plating right here. Moving to the lower leg on the right side here. Now I need to be careful about how I draw in the shelled plating and patterning on the lower legs, just to make sure everything is matched. I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue on the right side. Left side, it's going to take a little bit of work, I think. Alright, I think the talons on the tips of the toes are a little bit more defined now that I'm inking in the details here. That'll be functional. Now the real tricky part's going to be the left leg. This is lower left leg. Upper leg, I'm not too worried about. Let's make sure we get the same kind of consistent taper and shape going from the shins, calves, lower leg to the feet here. Okay, that's actually not that bad. It seemed like that gave me more trouble when I was sketching it out versus when I'm actually roughing in the finals for the line work here. Alright, let's move back up to the upper body, do the left arm, then do the tail, and then you can start cleaning up the line work. Alright, this should be relatively straightforward. Similar contouring and shapes on the upper arm. Alright, we'll leave that there for now. And then we'll see if anything needs to be changed with those sections when we go back to do the cleanup on the line work here. I think all that's left now is just to draw in the tail, the patterning on the tail. And that's it. Alright, let's save our progress so far. And then start working on cleanup. smaller eraser. Just like getting some of these more narrow sections. Yeah, that works a little bit better. I guess because I'm working at such a larger resolution here, the flaws in the line work are a little bit more apparent when I'm going in here and zooming in way close to do the cleanup, which I guess is good. Makes it easier to see where there are overflows or gaps in the line work, and I can clean them up here at this kind of granular level, and it should make everything look cleaner when zoomed out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move down the left leg this time, and then I'll scroll back up and do the right side of the body. I'm doing basically in reverse of the order I inked them here. Actually, maybe I'll do it this way, just so I don't waste time. I will work my way from the right side, bottom up, clean all the sections up as I work my way back up towards the right side of the body, right arm, shoulder, torso type area, and then do the cleanup that way. Doesn't really matter, I'm just trying to be systematic here. just checking the alignment and sort of layout of everything as we've kind of finalized and inked a lot of these sections. And fortunately, I don't think we really need to make any adjustments. Everything seems to be pretty consistent. And that's good. One of my goals for doing these drawing streams, in addition to just working on projects that I want to get completed and whatnot, I want to get more consistent with my drawing techniques. Again, like I've mentioned in the past, I'm historically a pencil on paper artist, and I've only been doing digital stuff for about, I don't know, a decade and change. Or maybe more than that, maybe a decade and a half-ish. But I want to learn more about digital drawing, coloring, and whatnot, just so I can continue to improve and get better. Alright, let's save our work and start looking at color assignment. I'll go ahead and zoom out. All right, line work looks pretty clean. Do need to fix this part of the neck though. There we go. Alright, set this as a reference. Add in our color layer. Now it's time to think about color paletting. Like I've done in the past for the Monster Hunter Fusion drawings, I think I want to establish the actual color palette before instead of doing it as I go. So let's see. Let's turn on our model comparison here. I'll keep the other one here. It's going to be kind of obscuring my line work, but that's okay. The first one, this was the male model over here. This one was a mix of greens, blues, dark blues, purples for the minerals and the digits. The female version, reds, purples, sort of tans and browns. Let's see, what would be a good contrasting palette for our new model here. Could do a mix of oranges. Sort of a sandy, almost earth tone set of colors. We could do a lighter skin tone right here for the main body and a darker plating color for the shelled armor. Let's see, for the crown, thinking like a burnt maroon color for the crown. Something like this, maybe a little lighter. Not that much lighter. I want it to be a little bit more of a contrast from the other colors. Since the crown doesn't really occupy that much space, I think that's probably okay. We'll go for kind of a more metallic or nail color for the other parts, the extensions on the crown, the spikes essentially. Hair color, we can go for like a pale sandy color for the hair. And these are approximates for the color palette. If I need to, I can adjust levels like we've done before. So I'm not too concerned about final colors. For eye color, what if we did purple for the eye color? And for the fleshy interconnected tissue and the digits, we could go like a dark teal. I may have to play around with the color scheme to see what that looks like compared to the others. But I think that could be a pretty functional palette. Now I'm going to try something different this time in the interest of being a bit more efficient. And we'll see if it works. I'm going to see if I can get my tablet up a little bit further on my desk. It's still tilted down, and I need to make sure I don't push it back too far. It's going to hit my camera stand. I'm going to move my keyboard and try not to drag it across my loop and unplug anything. But I'm going to try and shift click my fills for the color assignment so it doesn't take quite as long. Yeah, that'll work. Where's my mouse? Alright. Let's do this in... Alright, this is palette. Now I can type without reaching over. It's nice. We will call this skin. I want another one for hair and crown. If we had an outfit or clothing or armor, we'd have more things to sort of keep track of, but that should be fine. Now that I have my keyboard in front of me, I can shift select all the things here, which is definitely helpful. So now I'm going to move through and do each respective part of the palette and then start filling in the sections. Legs, feet. Alright, here's the base skin color. Now I'm going to do the plating next. This is much faster than trying to individually select all these. I'll just have to make sure I leave enough room on my desk. I'll do a different color for the toe talons, since that's a bit more of a distinct feature on this one. Plating on the neck needs to match. Same color. Same color as plating, rather. The interconnecting tissue, let's see what color we said. This dark teal. And the digits. There will be some small sections that, oh, I can zoom in and shift select them, I suppose. I'm going to have to go in and do cleanup anyway. So anything I don't get on the first pass, then I can just go in and fix later. That's not a big deal. It's mostly all of the big sections in order to make it faster to assign all the colors. Likewise, the toes. That's an interesting color contrast. I do like the dark teal blue as a way to sort of stand out against the sandy colored body in the plating. I think I'm going to leave that the way it is for now. Alright, now we could do the crown and the hair. Oh, we need to do the eye. Eye, we said purple. Hair and crown. Let's see, we said sort of darker, burnt color for the plating on the crown. Which is just this part right here that goes around the face. And this color for the horns and spiked extensions here. And which color did we say for the hair? Assign a color for the hair? Maybe not. I thought we did one for the hair. That's fine. Let's go... Let's go more of a pale yellow for the hair. See how that looks. Kind of a blonde, bright blonde color. That's fine. We can always change that later if we need to. All right. Just looking at the model, zoomed a little bit further out with the assigned color paletting. Yeah, I think that looks pretty decent. It's different from the other ones, that's for sure. If we were to compare it to the other models, just based on the colors, this one's a bit more bright. And the proportions are definitely different. You can tell that the new model has a more heavy build, which is what we were going for. Okay, so now I'm going to save this, move my keyboard back over there, and I'm going to zoom in and do a color cleanup before we can move on to shading. So I guess we could start with the hair and crowns. It's the top of the model. I don't think there's going to be a lot of empty gaps here. There'll be some on the narrow sections up here, like on the horns, but in general, the form fill was pretty clean. And I think, again, the high resolution is making that a bit easier. Okay, we don't want to mess around with that. That's skin layer. But unlike before, I'm going to just kind of jump from respective color to respective color and clean up any areas I see that are missing color fills. And one thing I like about Clip Studio, I think I've talked about this before. In case I haven't, I will mention it here, since I know one of the standards for digital drawing and artwork in general on the internet is Photoshop. And a lot of people I know use Photoshop, and I use Photoshop too, just not for doing stuff like this. One feature I like in Clip Studio, which is basically just a holdover from when it was Manga Studio back in the day, but I like that you can right click with your stylus or your tool, whatever you're using to your drawing, and it immediately color samples. I don't know if there's a way to configure Photoshop to do that, because I think it's the hotkey command in Photoshop, I believe, is I for the eyedropper. I think it's I. I'd have to go look. But unless there's a way to change the mapping of the keybinds, I don't think there's a way to set it so your mouse right click becomes the eyedropper or color sample. And that's just a default in Clip Studio. And I really like that. It means all I have to do is just right click and I can color sample and switch between whatever I need. And I need to turn on the color history wheel. My old configuration settings for Clip Studio had that. And I need to go back and re-enable that. It shows the color history of all the things you've used. The color swatches, essentially. And that's pretty handy if you're coloring stuff and you forget what color you had, or you're doing something more like a painterly project where you're doing layers and things are blending, but you need a specific color. The color history feature in Clip Studio, and I think Photoshop does it too. I've never enabled it, but that's also something that's pretty handy for making sure you can move and work through stuff efficiently. But the right click color sample default feature in Clip Studio I really like. For stuff like this, when I'm going and cleaning up the color assignment layer, that makes going through very easy. I don't even have to hit another button. I just have to right click. And if I was doing mouse-based image editing or something like that in Photoshop, that wouldn't be a big deal to just hit the hotkey for the color drop, eyedropper, and then do my color sampling and whatnot. But when I'm using my tablet, because my keyboard is not nearby, I would have to set a keybind on the actual tablet itself for the eyedropper command. And I currently have my buttons on this particular tablet mapped to other things. But I don't have to worry about that in Clip Studio, which is one of the reasons why it's my preferred program for drawing stuff. Another reason why I like Clip Studio is it's a bit less resource intensive, and it's not prone to random crashing as far as I know. I do tend to save my work frequently, just out of habit. But compared to Photoshop, I haven't had as many system instability problems using Clip Studio as I do with that particular Adobe product. Alright, just like before, I'm going to work my way to the right side. Clean up all the sections that I see, and then work my way up the model. Alright, working my way up the legs, to the arms. Yeah, more or less got the torso. Alright. I think that'll do it for color assignment. Now for the last leg, we can move on to shading. Switch up the beat a little bit. We'll set our clipping layer. We'll do the rough shade pass for the crown and the hair. Then we will move on to the skin tones and everything else, do in the same order we've done so far. Okay, do the same for the hair or horns, then the hair. The same down here. I guess I'll call these the tusks. I don't really have an official biological name. These parts on the crown that extend outwards like spikes. If they're around the face, we'll call them tusks for now. Alright, I think the shading levels are good for crown and the hair. Now let's move on to the rough shading pass for the skin layer. This will be the most work here. Just because there's the most area to shade. We'll start with the face and move our way down to the corresponding parts of the body. I think this part I will do sort of in sequence. So I'm going to shade all of the base skin tone parts first, and then do the plating, and then move through each section that way so I'm not constantly switching colors. Alright, move down to the arm. Let's see, I can go a little bit larger on my brush. Zoom out. Because this is the rough pass, I don't need to be that exact. I just need to kind of block in all the sections I want shaded, and then I'll go in and clean it up in the final pass for the shading layer. Alright. Same thing on the right side. Alright, making our way further down the model. Doing the shading layer on the legs. The upper lower legs, the last section, and then I can go in and do the plating next. That'll work. Oh, looks like I need to drop a little bit of color on the tip of the tail here that didn't fill properly. There we go. Alright. Rough pass on the right side's done. I always need to do the left. I guess while I'm working on the shading here, I can do like I've done in the past for some of these more boring sections of the drawing and do a little bit of a channel update / news stuff. We just did a drawing stream a couple days ago, so there's not going to be a whole lot that's really changed since then. I'm still working on a whole bunch of things that I need to get done in the next week or so and to complete and put out either on the channel here or online. But this week's content schedule, which again you can find on Twitter for what days I'm streaming, this week's going to be a bit of an experiment, kind of like the media share week we did. I'm going to be trying something different on this week's first chill stream, which I think is Wednesday this week. So far on the chill streams, we've done kind of a mix of just chatting, where I'm sitting here talking to you guys about stuff, or the tier lists, where I rank different items live on stream and subsequently get canceled for my bad opinions. The one thing I'm going to be trying for the first chill stream this week is a storytime stream. And I've not done that so far. It's been part of the plan for content, I just haven't done it yet. But for the storytime streams, what I'm going to be doing is preparing some specific stories from my past. They're not fictional. This is going to be all stuff that's happened to me before. Because whether I like it or not, I seem to be a magnet for funny stories happening either to me or around me. And there's definitely no shortage of stuff like that I want to just sort of share with you guys. So on the first chill stream, we'll be going through a bunch of stories from the past and talking about it. And specifically, it's going to be material taken from the kitchen era, if we're looking at the whole lore. I've mentioned before that my last job, before the one I have now, was working in a kitchen, and I worked in a kitchen for about 7 years, a little less than 7 years. On the actual stream, I'll do the full backstory and explain the whole setting and context, but it's sort of a preview. The stories that I'm going to be telling on the first story stream are all going to be from the kitchen era. There was quite a lot of interesting things that happened during that time. And I met some interesting people and learned a lot. A lot of stuff happened. So I will be preparing and telling a bunch of stories. I need to write a list and collect everything prior to the said stream, but that's going to be interesting. There's a good deal of funny and or embarrassing stories from that time that you guys might find amusing. So that'll be an experiment for this week. Testing out a storytime format. Other than that, everything else I've scheduled as far as content this week is going to be pretty consistent with what we've done up till now. I'm still kicking around the idea of potentially doing an ongoing Let's Play outside of streams, just to have additional content here that people can watch on YouTube. But I don't think I'm going to start looking at that until I finish recording and posting the Guilty Gear intro videos that I keep putting off. That is something I want to get done and out there so that I don't have to worry about it anymore. But as far as Let's Play stuff goes, we'll see. I inadvertently switched to the connective tissue shading layer, which I wouldn't normally have done, but we're here, so we're doing it. After this, I'll go back to the plating and do that layer for shading, and then that'll actually be it for the body. Start from the top. I'll go for a darker shade here. I'm getting to more of like a rusted color. Yeah, that'll work. Doesn't need to be too dark. We'll just work our way systematically down the body, starting with the upper torso, then the arms, then the lower extremities. I'll need to be careful about where my shading layers are overlapping here, so I'm not messing around with the shadowing too much. But for the first pass, it's not super critical. I'll just need to make sure I clean it up accordingly. We'll try and keep the shading in line too. arms. I need to do the arms yet on both sides. That's easy enough to just add in here. Do the left side, right side, and then the legs. Another type of content I've thought about doing, it's not as high on the priority list as some of the other stuff, but for art specifically, since a big part of this channel and the stuff I do is art related, I thought about doing speed drawing videos. They tend to be a little bit easier as far as content goes to make because you just have to record and edit. The reason why I haven't done speed drawing videos so far is because for the stuff we've drawn on stream primarily, the challenges maybe don't fit in this category as much. But for things like the Monster Fusion project and the Homeworld concept stuff like this, it's stuff I do want to talk about in real time. And I don't know if it'd necessarily be that much more of a benefit to doing a speed drawing format of that, other than it'd be offline content as opposed to stream content. Most of the drawing that I work on now, since I don't have a lot of free time, is on stream anyway. So that's why I didn't decide to convert it into an offline format, since I don't really have a lot of offline time to draw. But I'm open to the idea of speed drawings. Again, it's easier to do because I just have to record and edit. But we'll see. I don't want to create filler content just for the sake of uploading stuff, since I haven't habitually done that, so I'm not hitting the algorithm anyway. But if I feel like there's something interesting to be shown through a process like that, then I wouldn't rule it out. It's just not super high on my list of types of content to make right now. Alright. That should be it for the plating. With that, I think we're done with the first pass on shading when you do the eye. So let's do that before we move on. Highlight's a little distracting. I don't want it to look like a pupil. Maybe I'll leave it out for now. That's not a super critical element when it comes to the overall design here. Alright, let's go ahead and start cleaning up the edges on shading, and then we'll be done with our drawing. I do want to do some alt palettes for this one before we completely wrap up. That'll be the last thing we do once we finish shading here. Okay. Fortunately, not a whole lot to be really done on this section. It's only one small part that needs to be cleaned up. We can go ahead and move on to the skin. just like before, I'm not going to do the cleanup specifically section by section. I'm just going to work top down and clean up every spot that we're working through. The color doesn't matter necessarily here because I could jump to the color if I need to. Alright, we'll work through the chest part here and then start working on the rest of the torso and limbs. Definitely want to clean up the way the shadows are falling here on the chest plates. Actually move back up and do the left upper body side now before we move on. some cleanup sections. Oh, on the body here, I missed. Yeah. All right, back to the highlights. All right, there's that. Checking my eraser settings. I tend to go for a hard-edged one on the brush, purely because I like clean lines for my shadows. Eventually I'll need to experiment around with some other types and some other sort of softness or hardness when it comes to highlights and shading. But for stuff like the concept work, I do like the kind of hard-edged shadows, which is why I use this particular eraser type to go in and do the cleanup on the shading layer. Alright, working our way down to the legs, doing the final cleanup pass here on the shading. Bit of color bleed and overflow here I need to fix. It's another thing I'm keeping an eye out for as I'm fixing the shadows on these lower parts. Working on the right foot, shading around the toe area. I might as well do the tail while we're in this particular section of the body. Alright, we work our way up the right leg, the right arm, and we're pretty much done with the cleanup on shading, I think. Alright, let's clean up the sections on the arm. I'm going to start doing my final sweeps as far as the rest of the sections we've moved through. Oop. Alright, we'll zoom out. just kind of do a last check. Add a little more highlight to the eye. Make it look a little bit more like it has depth. Okay, this is the final version of our Homeworlder model. And let me drop this into its own folder so I can move it around, and then we'll do a comparison to the other ones we've drawn so far, and then we'll wrap up the session with some alts. Let me see if I can get my keyboard back over here and make this easier. I think I'm going to put the primer at the bottom of the hierarchy for folders. I'll need to use that in the future anyway. Alright. Actually, we'll do it in order. Order of creation, as it were. Scaling is going to be a bit funky on these because they were drawn in different canvases and layouts. In fact, the proportions on models 1 and 2 are... It actually scaled them down a little. For being accurate, it actually put them about there. It doesn't need to be exact. Again, these won't be compiled into the same image anyway. In fact, I think they technically need to be scaled down a little bit more. That's fine for comparison purposes here. Again, it doesn't need to be exact. But what we have from previous sessions, we have male model number 1, female model number 1, and I think we're going to call this female model number 2. We'll go in the opposite order. Since I did male model first and then female, we'll do female first, and then the next one I do will be a male model to go with this one. But based on the results here, we've got a different build, experimenting with a slightly heavier build. Still have pretty lengthy limbs. The style on the crown is a little bit different with the horns. And adding in something like the talon claws on the tips of the toes is a bit of a different feature. But I think this model right here, the new female one, is going to be the start of Series 2 of the Homeworlder models. So we'll go ahead and hide those. And then we'll put some alts on here. And then in the future, I will use this template when drawing the different characters for Homeworld. I do want to do an outfit or clothing drawing stream. That'll be at some point in the future because I want to add some outfits to these models that I'm drawing. But let's see, let's duplicate this. We'll call it 3B. Merge this into one. Put it over here. Let's see, I wonder if I can do an hue saturation edit to the whole thing without making the line work different colors. Yeah, that'll work. I like that purple. That's kind of an interesting alternate color palette. We'll do one more. If we have enough room, we'll see. Yeah, I think that three of them will just barely fit on the canvas here. This will be 3C. Yeah, just barely. For this one, let's see what color combinations we get. Up the saturation a little bit. Oh, that blue with the dark purple highlights on the under sections. That's not bad. I think that'll do. Save our work here. We will use this as a template for future ones. I do want to draw another male model in the second series from scratch and then experiment around with clothing and armor. Well, that'll be a future drawing stream. Next time we get back together for drawing stuff, I'll most likely finish off the Monster Hunter Triple Fusion we've been doing up till now, and then we'll return back to Homeworlder studies in the future. So, once again, I'll wrap it up for today's stream. So, as always, thanks to the people who stopped by and checked out the stream and hung out. But that'll do it for today. I will catch you guys in the next stream, and have a good evening.